Alice is trapped. The walls are closing in. A dark liquid is crawling up her legs, erasing her. The rabbit speaks with a voice of a dying man. It says her name. This is not a dream. This is a nightmare, and her only weapon is a single tear. Dash dash dash. A lone white rabbit hurried past Alice. Its eyes were wide with panic. It did not say hello. It just clutched a large, rusty key. Alice felt the air grow cold. The sweet smell of the meadow was gone. Now the air tasted of metal and old dust. She had to know about the key. She followed the rabbit into a thick hedge. The branches were not like normal branches. They felt like thin, bony fingers. They pulled at her hair in her blue dress. The tunnel behind the hedge was dark. It was too small for her. The walls were soft and warm. They pulsed slowly, like a sleeping heart. Alice could hear her own breathing. It was the only sound in the silence. Then, a low whisper started. It came from the walls themselves. The whisper was not in any language she knew. It was just a sound, like dry leaves scraping. It grew louder with every step she took. The warm, pulsing wall suddenly moved. It tightened around her. It was not a tunnel anymore. She was trapped. A faint, greenish light appeared up ahead. It illuminated a small, round room. The rabbit was there. It was standing perfectly still. It was not holding the key anymore. The key was on the floor. It was melting into a dark, sticky puddle. The rabbit turned its head to look at her. Its eyes were solid black. It opened its mouth. The voice that came out was not a rabbit's voice. It was deep and slow and old. The voice said her name. Alice. Then the walls began to bleed a thick, black liquid. The black liquid was not warm. It was cold, unnaturally cold. It seeped from the pulsing walls like sap from a wounded tree. The substance slid down the soft, warm surfaces. It did not drip. It flowed in a steady, deliberate sheet. The smell of metal grew stronger. Now it was the smell of old coins left in the rain. The whisper from the walls changed. It was no longer the sound of scraping leaves. It became a soft, wet gurgling. The sound of a throat filling with water. Alice tried to step back. Her feet would not obey. She looked down. The floor was changing. It was no longer solid earth. It was becoming soft and spongy. It held her shoes in a gentle, firm grip. The dark liquid reached the floor. It did not pool. It was absorbed instantly. The floor beneath her feet shuddered. A low groan vibrated through the soles of her shoes. The rabbit watched. Its black eyes reflected no light. They were voids, empty holes in the world. The rabbit spoke again. Its mouth moved out of sync with the deep, old voice. "You are late," the voice said. Each word was heavy. Each word sank into the air like a stone in a pond. Alice tried to speak. She tried to ask a question. Any question. Her voice was gone. Her throat was tight and dry. She could only stare at the melting key. The puddle was spreading. It touched the toe of her left shoe. The leather of her shoe began to curl. It blackened and shriveled without heat. It was a cold decay. A silent destruction. She felt a strange numbness crawl up her foot. It was not pain. It was an absence. A feeling of nothingness. The whisper gurgle from the walls grew louder. It formed words she could almost understand. It was a language of roots and stones. A language of deep, dark places. The round room began to contract. The soft, warm walls pressed inward. They were sticky now. The black liquid made them gleam in the eerie green light. Tendrils emerged from the walls. Slender, questing filaments of the same substance as the walls. They reached for her arms. They were slow, deliberate, inevitable. One touched her wrist. It was not wet. It was dry and smooth like old parchment. It wrapped around her skin with the gentleness of a snake. It did not squeeze. It just held. More tendrils descended from the ceiling. They swayed like seaweed in a slow current. The rabbit had not moved. It was a statue of fur and silence. The voice came from the rabbit, but also from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. "You took a path that was not meant for you," the voice intoned. "The doors are closing." Alice saw the entrance to the tunnel. The hole through which she had crawled. It was shrinking. The hedge was knitting itself back together. Thorns, long and sharp, grew where there were none before. The light from the normal world was a distant, shrinking circle. The numbness reached her ankle. She could not feel the floor anymore. It was as if her foot had been erased. She pulled against the tendril on her wrist. It held fast. It was stronger than iron. Another tendril brushed against her cheek. She flinched. It was cold as a grave. It traced the line of her jaw. A single, clear memory flashed in her mind. A memory of her sister reading to her by the river. The sun was warm on her face. The sound of the water was gentle. It was a world away. It was a lifetime ago. The contrast was a physical pain in her chest. The greenish light in the room began to pulse. It pulsed in time with the wall's heartbeat. A slow, rhythmic throb. The puddle from the key was now a small, black lake. It surrounded the rabbit, who stood unmoving in the center of it. The liquid began to rise. It climbed the rabbit's white fur. The fur did not become wet. It simply turned black. The color was consumed. The rabbit became a silhouette. A cut-out shape of nothing. The rising blackness began to flow toward her. It moved against the slope of the floor. It had a purpose. It knew where it was going. The tendril on her wrist tightened slightly. It was a warning, a command to be still. The gurgling whispers were now clear. They were chanting, a single word, over and over. A word that spoke of endings. A word that spoke of silence. The light from the entrance tunnel winked out. The thorns had sealed it completely. She was in a closed space. A living, breathing, hungry space. The black liquid was at her other foot now. The numbness climbed. Her breath hitched in her throat. She was a statue of fear. The rabbit, now completely black, raised a paw. It pointed at her heart. The deep voice spoke its final word. The word was her name, once more. But this time, it was not a greeting. It was a label. It was a definition. It was the last sound she would ever hear. The tendrils pulled. The liquid rose. The world went dark. A single, hot tear traced a path down Alice's cold cheek. It fell. It did not fall into the creeping blackness. It fell onto the tendril wrapped around her wrist. Where the tear touched, the dry, parchment-like skin of the tendril sizzled. A tiny wisp of steam, pale as a ghost, curled into the air. The tendril recoiled. It was not a violent jerk, but a slow, surprised unfurling. A shudder ran through the pulsing walls. The low gurgling chant faltered, skipping a single, crucial beat. In that instant of silence, a new sensation bloomed in Alice's chest. It was not hope, not quite. It was a memory of warmth. It was the firm, solid feeling of her own name, her real name, not the one the voice had stolen. She took a breath. It was not a gasp of fear. It was a deep, deliberate breath, the kind she took before blowing out all the candles on a birthday cake. And with that exhale, she spoke a single word. No. Her voice was small in the vast, hungry room. But it was her own. It did not echo, but it held. The word hung in the air, a tiny, bright shield against the darkness. The black liquid, which had been lapping at her knees, stopped its advance. The rabbit's outstretched paw began to tremble. The deep, ancient voice did not speak again. Instead, a different sound emerged. A sound like a great, weighty sigh. It was the sound of a story accepting a different ending. The greenish light in the room softened. The throbbing pulse slowed, becoming a gentle, fading rhythm. The tendrils retreated, slithering back into the walls without a sound. The floor released her feet, the spongy texture firming into solid, cool earth. The numbness receded from her legs, replaced by the tingling sensation of life returning. Before her, the silhouette of the rabbit began to lose its form. The absolute blackness bled away, like ink dissolving in clear water. For a fleeting moment, it was just a white rabbit again, its eyes wide and confused. Then, it turned and hopped away. It did not vanish. It simply stepped into a patch of shadow and was gone. The wall where the entrance had been sealed was no longer a wall of thorns. It was a curtain of weeping willow branches, pale green and trailing softly to the ground. A gentle breeze filtered through them, carrying the clean, sweet scent of rain and grass. Sunlight, real and golden, dappled the floor of the now ordinary-looking clearing. Alice stood for a long time, breathing in the familiar air. She looked at the spot where the key had melted. There was no puddle, only a single, perfect white mushroom growing in the moss. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel brave. She felt quiet. She felt real. She smoothed down the front of her blue dress, brushed a stray leaf from her shoulder, and turned. She parted the willow branches and stepped through. She did not look back. The world on the other side was her own. The river murmured in the distance. Her sister was still reading, her voice a soft, steady hum. The sun was warm on her face. Alice walked to her sister's side and sat down. She picked up a blade of grass and felt its living greenness between her fingers. She was home, and for now, that was the only wonder she needed.